Now there's a comfortable way to look.
Multicolor mood ring. This is the ring that senses your deepest feelings.
Face waist in the sharpest pain. See my son.
Fashion has always been about bold risks, sometimes genius, sometimes downright bizarre. From the 1950s to the 1990s, designers pushed boundaries with clothing and accessories that promised to revolutionize the way we dressed. Some were futuristic, others were just plain weird, but they all shared one thing in common. They flopped spectacularly. These were the outfits meant to turn heads, but instead left people scratching their heads. Today, we're diving into the forgotten fashion graveyard to uncover 25 innovative clothing items that failed miserably. In the mid-1960s, the fashion world thought it had struck gold with the disposable paper dress. Created by the Scott Paper Company in 1966, these dresses were made entirely of paper reinforced with cellulose, sold for only $1.25, and came in bold, pop art-inspired prints. They were marketed as fun, trendy, and even practical. You could literally wear one to a party and toss it out afterward. But here's where things went wrong. Paper and durability don't exactly mix. A spilled drink, a windy day, or even sitting down the wrong way could ruin your outfit. On top of that, concerns about flammability made them more dangerous than stylish. While they became a quirky collectible, they quickly vanished from mainstream fashion. But as strange as paper clothing was, it wasn't the only experiment in material failure. Let's move to another oddity: plastic clothes of the 1960s. In the swinging 60s, plastics were the future. Everything from furniture to home decor was being molded out of shiny new polymers. Naturally, designers thought fashion could ride this wave too. Enter plastic clothing. Raincoats, dresses, and even boots made from transparent PVC and vinyl. They were supposed to look futuristic and space-age, inspired by the growing obsession with space exploration. But the reality was less glamorous. These clothes trapped heat, made wearers sweat profusely, and had a stiff, uncomfortable feel. Imagine trying to look stylish while feeling like you're wrapped in a greenhouse. On top of that, the see-through look wasn't exactly flattering for everyone. While they were a hit in fashion shows, the everyday shopper wanted comfort over space-age fantasy. Once the novelty wore off, plastic fashion melted away. Still, if you thought plastic was impractical, wait until you hear about inflatable clothing from the 1960s. Yes, inflatable clothing was real, and it wasn't just a crazy gimmick. Designers in the late 1960s experimented with inflatable dresses and coats that featured built-in air pockets you could literally blow up. The idea was that people could customize their silhouette, adjusting puffiness to match their mood or style. It sounded futuristic and fun, but here's where it crashed: practicality. Inflatable valves on clothes looked silly. They were prone to leaking, and sitting down too quickly could literally deflate your fashion statement. Worse, the garments made a strange squeaky noise when you moved, drawing laughs instead of admiration. While they got some attention at avant-garde fashion shows, nobody wanted to risk popping their outfit at a dinner party. Inflatable fashion deflated quickly. Let's slide into the colorful world of mood rings from the 1970s, which promised to read your emotions.
Typically developed, the incredible chromostone senses thermal changes deep within your body, reflects all your mood changes in a fascinating kaleidoscope of color.
Few accessories captured the 1970s obsession with self-expression like the mood ring. Invented in 1975 by Joshua Reynolds and Maris Ambatz, these rings used thermochromic liquid crystals that changed color with body temperature, supposedly reflecting your mood. Blue meant calm, green meant relaxed, and black meant stressed. At first, mood rings were a massive hit. Millions were sold within months, and everyone wanted one. But the magic quickly wore off. People realized the rings weren't reading emotions at all. They were simply reacting to temperature changes. Take a sip of hot coffee, and suddenly your ring shows love, Step outside in winter, and you are instantly depressed. Once the novelty faded, so did sales. By the early 1980s, they were more of a nostalgic gimmick than a serious fashion piece. In the late 1960s and into the 70s, some bold designers experimented with clothing that could light up. One pioneer was Diana Dew, whose battery-powered garments had embedded lights you could dim or brighten by a small knob. The idea was to merge fashion with electronics, to wear a dress that glowed in a club or a jacket that flickered with changing mood. But the reality was far less glamorous. The electronics added bulk, the wires were fragile, the batteries drained fast, and the garments were uncomfortable or heavy. Many pieces failed mid-wear, lights flickered, or the whole thing short-circuited. It was dazzling in shows, but impractical for daily use. Audiences loved the spectacle, but buyers didn't want to risk a blackout dress. And while glowing clothes were flashy, next we get to a more outrageous idea: heated garments of the 1970s and 1980s. The idea of wearing clothes that warm themselves sounds appealing in cold weather. No bulky layers, just stylish, warm garments. In the mid-1970s, inventor Gordon Gerbing began integrating heating elements, using wires, into jackets for motorcyclists. But early attempts had serious flaws. The wiring could fail or short, producing cold patches, or worse, overheating and burning the fabric or skin. Batteries were heavy, expensive, and had poor runtime. Military experiments earlier in high-altitude flight suits also showed the risk. Electric heating systems would often fail mid-flight, leaving wearers freezing. Because reliability, safety, and cost issues were too high, the concept never broke through for mass fashion. Only niche use survived. But if you thought heating clothing was offbeat, wait until you hear about what's next. Clothing. Thermochromic fabrics change color with heat, your body heat, ambient temperature, or touch. In the 1980s, novelty designers explored dresses or shirts that would shift hue as you moved or warmed up. The concept was poetic. You become your own canvas. But execution was weak. The color change effect was often subtle or inconsistent, especially on larger panels. After repeated washes, the thermochromic pigments degraded. Also, lighting, shadows, and temperature differences made the effect look patchy or unintentional. So, while people loved the idea, the results looked gimmicky, not elegant. Many prototypes never made it beyond concept. In the 1980s and 90s, engineers and designers toyed with embedding antennas or radio signal components into clothing, so your jacket might double as a receiver or wearable communication interface. The promise: clothes that could intercept signals, broadcast music, or connect to devices. But technical and practical problems killed it. The conductive elements couldn't flex well with fabric movement, leading to breaks. Interference, signal loss, and electromagnetic safety issues were real concerns. Also, the added cost and complexity far outweighed the perceived utility. The result? A handful of prototypes, much promise, and very few real products.
Brake parts for Casio. Would you rather have a calculator or a watch? With a Casio calculator watch,
if you grew up in the 1980s, you probably remember Casio's calculator watches. They were marketed as a glimpse of the digital future. Not only could you tell time, but you could also crunch numbers right on your wrist. Students loved them. Office workers thought they were clever, and geeks wore them proudly. But while innovative, they had some fatal flaws. The tiny rubber buttons were nearly impossible to press accurately, especially for people with larger fingers. They weren't fashionable either. Bulky, plastic, and clunky, they stood out awkwardly against more elegant wristwatches. Worse, schools often banned them because kids used them to cheat on math tests. By the 1990s, they were considered nerdy relics of the past. The grunge era of the early 1990s made flannel shirts the unofficial uniform of rebellion. Inspired by Seattle's music scene, Bands like Nirvana and Pearl Jam popularized oversized flannels layered over t-shirts and ripped jeans. What started as an authentic, rugged style for musicians became a global craze. But as mainstream fashion latched on, flannel went from cool to cliché. Clothing brands mass-produced low-quality flannels that were scratchy, poorly cut, and often polyester rather than real cotton. Soon, everyone had one, from suburban teens to office workers. The very thing that made grunge fashion appealing, its authenticity, was destroyed by commercialization. By the late 90s, the flannel craze had fizzled out, leaving behind closets full of shapeless plaid shirts. The 1960s and 1970s were defined by space exploration, and fashion designers couldn't resist bringing cosmic vibes to the runway. Enter the bubble helmet, a giant see-through dome that covered the entire head, often paired with sleek, futuristic outfits. The idea was to create a modern, sci-fi-inspired look while also showcasing the makeup and hairstyle beneath. While it looked daring on models, the practicality was a nightmare. The helmets fogged up easily, made it hard to breathe, and were awkward to wear for more than a few minutes. Imagine trying to sip a drink or have a conversation through a fishbowl. That's exactly why it failed. By the 1970s, the fad fizzled out, leaving behind only photos of daring runway models. Zoot suits were huge, loud outfits from the 1940s that made a bold scene on city streets. Baggy pants, wide lapels, padded shoulders, and tall hats gave wearers a striking look. But the suits also carried a heavy weight of unfair ideas and insults aimed at Black and Latino young people. These clothes became a symbol that people used to blame and fear others, and that led to real fights and deep hurt. Over time, the suits faded as tastes changed and people moved away from the painful parts of that story. Today, the zoot suit lives mostly in photos and memories. Patterned tights first danced into style in the 1960s, when bright shapes and swirling lines felt fresh and free. People loved the wild prints that turned plain legs into moving art. After a brief revival as workout gear, they slipped quietly off the shelves. Today, they're gone from stores, replaced by simple black leggings in gyms and on city streets. Fashion once treated patterned tights as bold statements, but now they linger only in old photos and memories. Proof that some trends vanish as quickly as they appear. In the 1970s, jumpsuits for men were a short-lived but strange idea. One-piece outfits that covered the whole body. They came with frills, big collars, and bright or odd colors. For a time, grown men wore these suits to parties and nights out, sometimes looking like stage performers more than everyday people. Most found the look too odd to last, and the jumpsuit quickly left regular wardrobes. Today, a jumpsuit can still be fun for a costume or a show, but it no longer fits normal street style. People now prefer clothes that mix and match easily. The jumpsuit era shows how bold fashion can be, but also how fast taste can change. Looking back, jumpsuits remind us that fashion can be playful, daring, and sometimes awkward in life. And if men's jumpsuits weren't daring enough, what about collars so wide they nearly took flight? Wide collared shirts popped up in the 1970s and felt like they came from another planet. The collars spread wide like wings and pushed out from underneath jackets. Some people loved their bold, dramatic shape. Others thought they looked silly or overdone. The style became tied to disco lights, shiny suits, and a certain kind of bravado. It suited a very small group of faces and a certain confident attitude. As music and mood shifted, the wide collars slowly shrank back into simpler shapes. Now, they are mostly a fun memory or a throwback pick for fans of the era. Neon headbands and wristbands screamed 1980s. Bright, stretchy bands wrapped around heads and wrists while people jumped, danced, and played sports. They soaked up sweat and glowed under bright lights, making them a clear sign of the decade. At first, they seemed fun and useful, but the look grew tied to loud colors and fast trends. After the 80s faded, Most people let those bands rest in drawers. Today, you might see them at a themed party or in a fitness class that likes retro style, but they are no longer everyday gear. The neon bands are a tiny, playful piece of fashion history. They show how strong a moment can be when color and sport meet pop culture. Hammer pants arrived with a beat and a dance in 1990. Huge, baggy pants with low crotches and wide legs made movement bold and easy. MC Hammer wore them on stage and in music videos, and soon kids copied the dramatic look. The pants stood out in a crowd. They moved with big steps and quick kicks. But the style was hard to wear in normal life and quickly felt strange on sidewalks or in school halls. Today, hammer pants are mostly a memory tied to a few songs and dance moves. They show how a pop star can turn a wild idea into a trend, even if it only lasts a short while. They are fun to watch in old videos and remind us how music made style jump. Poodle skirts were a big, twirly skirt that marked a certain time. They were full-circle skirts made of felt, often plain except for a bright poodle sewn near the hem. Teen girls loved them for dances and sock hops because they flared out when you spun. The skirt looked fun and young, but it also felt very literal and childlike. As people grew older, the playful poodle seemed less right for grown-up style. The heavy felt fabric could be hot and stiff, and the big, obvious design left little room for change. Today, the silhouette can be charming, but the appliqued poodles belong in old photos now. Paisley print was a wild, swirly pattern that filled shirts, dresses, and scarves in the 1960s and beyond. The design looked like curved teardrops or little flames all tangled together. In calm colors, it could be pretty, but when paired with bright, clashing shades, the print overwhelmed the eye. People who wore head-to-toe paisley sometimes looked like walking wallpaper or a busy curtain. The pattern asked for quiet, careful styling, but many outfits did the opposite and piled on more bold items and loud accessories. That made the whole look tiring to watch. Today, a paisley accent can work, but full prints rarely do. Parachute pants were a loud, shiny fashion that tried to bring big energy to the street. Made from nylon, the same slick stuff used for parachutes, they moved with a loud swish. People loved the neon colors, the roomy fit, and the many zippers. But the pants also trapped heat and looked bulky on many bodies. The fabric did not breathe, so wearers could get hot fast. The baggy shape and extra folds at the ankles did not flatter most legs, and the wild patterns made many outfits feel noisy. Over time, comfort and simple lines won out, and parachute pants slipped out of mainstream style. Today, you might spot them in retro parties or music videos, but mostly as a joke or costume rather than real everyday wear. Animal print clothing roared into fashion with bold confidence, often louder than the people wearing it. Leopard, zebra, and tiger patterns appeared on jackets, skirts, dresses, and even pants, cut from thick fabrics and designed to demand attention. These looks were paired with shiny shirts, bright ties, or metallic accessories, creating outfits that rarely whispered subtlety. For some, a touch of animal print still adds spice, but the head-to-toe ensembles of that era felt closer to costumes than clothes. They drew eyes, yes, but the heavy patterns and extra shine left little room for balance. Today, designers favor small accents, belts, shoes, or trims over the full wild look. Leg warmers turned 1980s workouts into a bright, fuzzy performance. These knit tubes hugged calves in neon and pastels, adding a playful, cozy look to leotards, big hair, and booming aerobics classes. More style than function, they gave outfits texture and movement, part costume, part confidence boost. In practice, gyms are usually warm and machines heat the room, so leg warmers weren't needed to stay warm. Dancers sometimes used them to keep muscles loose between sets, but for most people, they were a fashion choice. Their peak was as a bold style statement. Today, they pop up mostly in costumes, stage shows, and retro photo shoots. A colorful throwback to an era that loved to make exercise into theater. Tying a sweater around the neck once read as effortless prep, a casual shrug disguised as polish. Somewhere along the line, the move became less about practical layering and more about declaring membership in a club. No bag, no pockets, no problem. Just loop, knot, and go. The look promised nonchalance but often landed fussy. A loose tail flapped at the chest, sleeves refused to stay neat, and an implicit "don't bother" carrying extra things attitude took over. More than warmth, it signaled an aesthetic choice: preppy, ironic, or merely convenient. As seasons turned, the ritual loosened from mainstream wardrobes, traded for real cardigans and hands-free bags. Trends fade, yet something small is ready to take center stage, and faces will notice. Tiny, tinted sunglasses shrank lenses to slivers, leaving more face than frame and a look that exaggerated proportions. The micro-sized trend arrived in rose, amber, and violet tints that washed scenes in filtered color, promising instant attitude for anyone who slipped them on. For some, the glasses read as a deliberate nod to irreverence and celeb culture. For many, they simply made features look oddly outsized and offered little real protection from the sun. Best reserved for editorial shoots or festival kits, the minuscule lenses performed as punctuation rather than practical eyewear. Runway drops and capsule collections revived them now and then, but most people moved back toward frames that flatter and actually shade. Bubble skirts, once the puffed stars of prom photos and stage lights, ballooned into cartoonish silhouettes. In their 1980s heyday, they read theatrical. Voluminous hems gathered and puffed outward, demanding attention. The effect could be charming or juvenile, depending on context. But that version has not returned. Instead, today's revival reshapes the bubble into sleeker, more intentional forms. Gentler gathers, cleaner lines, and lighter fabrics that keep volume while shedding the costume feel. The shift makes the bubble concept wearable without its old baggage. Younger wearers embrace the playfulness yet pair bubbles with minimal tops and grounded shoes to balance proportions. Once a loud statement, the bubble skirt now reappears as an edited silhouette, flirtatious but measured, more at ease in modern wardrobes than shouting under stage lights.